Hybrid warfare is a relatively new concept, and if anyone knows the toll it can take on society, it's Ukraine. Hybrid and new warfare sows fear, chaos, and uncertainty. Good evening, my name is Maia Mazurkiewicz, and welcome to the Anatomy of Disinformation. So how do states and institutions fight it? Digital Europe has launched a €5 million call for proposals to strengthen the European fact-checking network, open to Moldova and Ukraine, that shows that the EU is aware of influence operations happening on the ground in these two countries. Today, we'll try to understand who has a bigger chance of winning this fight. Ukraine is a laboratory for testing new technology. How are influence operations and hybrid warfare affecting the country? Is the society still strong, or has its morale been undercut by Russia's unconventional operations? And how is the state dealing with it? Let's find out with our first guest.
Laurențiu Pleșca, Program Coordinator at the Black Sea Trust of the German Marshall Fund of the United States. He was born in Chișinău in the Republic of Moldova and graduated from the University of Bucharest with a degree in political science. Mr. Pleșca is a PhD candidate in political science and a researcher at the Romanian Center for Russian Studies, University of Bucharest. His main areas of expertise include Russia's geopolitics in the Black Sea region, the Eastern Partnership, and EU foreign and security policy.
Laurențiu, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, sir, for your kind invitation.
Thank you. Well, I have a straightforward question. Is Moldova ready to hold free and secure upcoming parliamentary elections?
I would say that this year is another critical year for the Republic of Moldova because there will be elections that will be organized on September 28th. Following other types of elections, local elections in 2023, presidential elections and EU referendum in autumn of 2024. And since these elections, Moldova, I would say, has made important improvements in preparing for election, especially through adoption of institutional and legal reforms. I would mention here the new electoral code that introduced clearer rules on campaign financing, because this is a hurting issue for the Republic of Moldova, but also on increasing transparency, on stronger oversight mechanisms related to campaigning, but also indicating more improving of electoral integrity that was not the case before this election.
So those changes were put into force after the elections in 2024?
They were put before the elections, following the local elections in 2023. And basically, Moldova has set also new institutions in addition to changing its electoral code. And these institutions were the Center for Strategic Communication and Combating Disinformation. This is one institution. And another one, National Cybersecurity Agency. Of course, these institutions were created before the presidential elections and EU referendum in 2024, but now they are much more active, they are being budgeted, and they will really help for the electoral integrity process in the countries, because I would say that the biggest problem in the Moldovan elections is, of course, the foreign information and malign information of Russian Federation, but also the disinformation campaigns, the several hybrid war instruments that Russia uses in Moldova.
Well, you had a break in between the campaigns, elections and the campaign. Was still influence operations in place and they were visible, or there was a kind of a calm period and they are back now because you already entered the parliamentary campaign, right?
They were never passive. They were active before the elections, after the elections. Now there are 4 more months until the elections, but the election campaign in Moldova has started months ago. And we see in the information space a lot of fake news, a lot of disinformation campaigns against the government, against the EU institutions, promoting several narratives that were
Can you
used.
give the examples of those narratives, please?
Of course, that Moldova, first of all, will be dragged in the war in Ukraine. That's the first narrative that comes to my mind. But also that the current government is incompetent, that, of course, Moldova is receiving loans from the EU institutions, and this will not be good because Moldova will be in debt, and Moldova should not be attracted in any states of affairs of the other countries, because from the presidential elections and new referendum in 2024 until now, in the neighboring country, Romania, there were presidential elections, and we've seen much more tactics that were used similarly to Moldovan elections, where the Russian Federation has invested a lot of resources in amplifying the pro-Russian candidates' narratives that were basically also Romanian elections are really important in this context because many Moldovans that hold dual citizenship voted in these elections. So we saw a big turnout.
So exactly, and you were talking about financing of the campaigns. So do you think that what is in place right now is supporting to show that this financing is much more transparent? Or, on the other hand, still those narratives that you mentioned are being pushed through the different sources and they are not directly connected to the campaign?
Of course, the financing of the campaign was on the paper solved, but in reality, we see that Russian Federation is investing a lot of money in supporting local actors of influence, pro-Russian parties that will participate in the September 28 elections. They are also investing, and this is maybe a new phenomenon, they are investing in pseudo-European parties that have a pro-EU agenda, but in reality they are operating against the EU vector. And remember the presidential elections and new referendum in Moldova, where the vote buying was used at a larger scale, where more than 130,000 of votes were bought by the fugitive oligarch Iran Shor that now is residing in Russia.
What is the percentage of the total votes in this? Did it affect the elections?
It affected the elections because, if I remember correctly, almost 1.5 billion voted. And this is the number that I just mentioned, 130,000. This is around 9 or 10% of the potential of the vote. But imagine also the resources that were invested by Russia in this kind of vote buying, because if you compare to the actual GDP of Moldova, that is not so big, a big proportion of money that were invested in this little country, around 1% of GDP, according to the Prime Minister of Republic of Moldova, Recean. This is a really unprecedented number for a country that is now basically doing reforms and also trying to prevent this FIMI and disinformation campaign. But I would say that Moldovan institutions right now are effectively building a plane while flying it, responding to threats in real time while still developing the necessary institutional muscle to match them.
What role do pro-Russian media and disinformation channels play in Moldova today?
First of all, media is a big part of the pro-Russian propaganda that is being made in Moldova. Of course, that pro-Russian media channels were banned where the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started. So, because these channels were basically advocating for Russia's righteousness in this war, and also they were promoting anti-Ukraine messages. But after these channels were banned from TV, they were really appearing in the online media. So Russia has invested a lot of money in promoting media channels that were really active, writing hundreds of pieces of information for Moldovans in Romanian, in Russian, of course also in English, because to explain also for the international audience that basically Moldovans want a different path than the EU path. So these channels were really active, but I will also mention Telegram channels that are really omnipresent in Republic of Moldova, because Moldova has a really developed Telegram network with many users, and these channels are a big part of Russian disinformation campaigns, because many Moldovans do not trust right now traditional media, so they are really using new type of media.
Laurențiu, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a tough work to protect the elections in Moldova, so good luck.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
How has the media landscape in Ukraine changed following Russia's invasion? Are Ukrainian media outlets infallible when it comes to countering Russian disinformation, or is there still room for improvement? Find out in this report.
Ukraine's fight with Russian disinformation started well before the Russian invasion of 2022.
The banning of certain media outlets in Ukraine already started in 2017. It's not only like the regular media, like Russia Today or Rossiya Sogotnya, RBC, but it's also some social media platforms. So you can still use fake kontakty, but I think you need VPN to do this. So most Ukrainian people stopped using fake kontakty, but you also have this classmates, Odnoklasniki. That was also banned. You can't use Yandex any longer.
In the days following Russia's launch of the invasion, a decision was made at a governmental level in Kiev to unite major media outlets into a single broadcasting body. Still, there are plenty of media outlets operating outside of what's called the Marathon United News bloc. But it's not just standard media outlets that are tasked with exposing disinformation. Special government bodies have been set up for this very purpose.
There is a disinfo center under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. They have a group of about 50 people, and they specifically work on debunking Russian propaganda. And they have a website, a Telegram site, and a quite popular Twitter account.
Here's a case study of a disinformation narrative that Ukrainian media outlets and counter-disinfo ops have had to deal with.
For instance, Zelensky buys old car from that was owned by Hitler in the past. I don't even understand that people really think this is true, but they look at like how did it start, and that it's completely ridiculous. Zelensky would never want to buy Hitler's cars because it would undermine foreign support, and let's not forget that he's Jewish.
Ukrainian media outlets and the Counter-Disinformation Center tackled this disinformation attempt with fact-checking. But is it really the right method?
I don't think you should spend all time only on debunking and fact-checking, because it's quite difficult to tell who your public is. And the moment that you start debunking stuff, then you also show it to people who've never seen this propaganda. So in a way, the moment that you start debunking, fact-checking, you're also giving it a wider reach to people who may have never seen it before.
This shows that the information environment in Ukraine is a particularly murky dimension for Ukrainian media to navigate through, especially with suspicious open-source intelligence entities becoming ever more active.
There are a lot of OSINT accounts claiming to be OSINT accounts, but what they do is they use propaganda and try to make it seem like it's OSINT. And what happens more and more is also that news outlet gets emails from all kinds of weird people with so-called fact checks, like this was destroyed or this was done. So these people actively try and push their propaganda now to media.
According to the Center for Countering Disinformation, Ukraine has identified over 22,000 information threats as of June 8, 2025.
The pro-Kremlin opposition in Moldova is well established and prepared for the election campaign. Is the government also ready to protect Moldova's information space? What actions are state institutions and civil society undertaking? And when will we start to see the effects? We'll talk about that and more with our next guest.
Mykola Balaban, Deputy Head, Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security of Ukraine. He coordinates efforts between government institutions, civil society, and international organizations to counter Russian disinformation and strengthen strategic communications. Dr. Balaban previously headed the Situation Center at the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, where he oversaw global media monitoring and crisis communication strategies. He holds a PhD in history from the Ukrainian Catholic University and was a junior visiting fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna. He was formerly the head of Situation Center at the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. A veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian War, Dr. Balaban is a historian and an expert in hybrid warfare.
Mykola, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today straight from Kyiv.
Thank you very much, and my gratitude for having me. I think maybe you heard behind there is the air alarm, air raid. Unfortunately, Russia bombard us constantly, and just today, 2 hours ago, was big bombardment of center of the Sumy city. Couple people were killed.
And it's much more difficult to understand what is happening in there if we are not in Ukraine, but I'm happy that we can talk about it, and also, especially, obviously, about Russian influence operations and disinformation, because it highly works on this sphere as well. So, is the intensity of the Russian disinformation in Ukraine strengthened and bigger than it used to be? Especially in the everyday life and in the digital space?
A short answer, yes. A little bit longer answer is basically what we observe since full-scale invasion. Basically, we can divide into the 3 phases of influence operation. The initial phase was what we called information blitzkrieg. It was first couple months of full-scale invasion. It was the tactics was like this overwhelming info offensive to demoralize and destabilize Ukraine. It was based on false claims on rapid Russian victory. It was supported by deepfakes, that Zelensky, for example, surrender or fled the countries. It was mainly the Russians tried to make this like Ukrainian society to panic, and this panic inducting fakes. And the target was like societal shock and rapid disintegration of Ukrainian defense. They failed to do that. And the second phase, it was around like year and a half. We call it information trench warfare. It was persistence attack on morale, trust, and unity of Ukrainian society, exploiting war fatigue and crises, and also that was the time when there was a very big bombardment of Ukrainian critical infrastructure. And what we have right now, what we observe for the last year in Russian information operations, this phase we called information exhaustion. It's flooding information space with low quality content, sometimes with AI-generated fakes, with the aim to overwhelm public with noise, induce apathy and confusion. Another very important thing about this phase is this narrative adoption. It's less overt pro-Russian content, more focusing on sowing doubt and distrust, weaponization, pluralism. So what we see right now.
And you were saying that they failed, right? When you were mentioning few of the influence operations. Well, they failed, or you managed to protect it. It's also defense that you are quite strong in.
Definitely. First of all, I want to underline that basically what we see in Ukraine is this hybridity, or what we call, like, there is like classical conventional warfare, but at the same time there is a layer, like the very close layer of influence operation on Ukrainian society. So basically they copied or paralleled Russian like tactics on the ground with the tactics in influence operation. For example, when they had this idea on the ground that they will very quickly basically destroy Ukrainian government and this blitzkrieg style, so they copy that in the information space. They are not managed to do neither in the sphere of conventional warfare nor in the sphere of information warfare, and they stop with a lot of actions. Of course, like it was because Ukrainian society, both government and civil society, was aware of Russian disinformation tactics and approaches, and basically this. What we called in Ukraine beehive countering, like Russian information operations. So basically with the social mobilization, also with the government, it's made possible, that we push out this Russian information attack.
What were the channels that the government used to make the society aware?
Look, first of all, when we're talking about Ukrainian society and its resilience, it started in 2014, because when Russia attacked Crimea, like basically annexed Crimea and attacked Ukrainian parts in the eastern Ukraine, there was, at that time, people was not prepared. But since then, a lot of
people were not prepared, and also the government wasn't prepared, right?
Yes, and yeah, of course. But everything starts with the people, and basically society built up a lot of civil society groups, journalist groups, different organizations, and they built up expertise against this type of operation. And of course, government also step in that. Society and government was basically joining together in their attempts to build up this resilience.
And about the strategic communication, because it's also one of the tactics, right, that you are using. What is important? How it's important to own the narrative, and do you feel that you're owning the narrative right now in Ukraine?
Oh, definitely. Look, because Ukraine is standing, Ukrainian army is fighting, Ukrainian society is, of course, very tired, but we are had the will to resist the Russian invasion. It's mean that basically that we are on top. We are leading Ukrainian government leading the narrative. So definitely.
Mykola, I hear you loud and clear that also security of the European Union and European countries depends on the strong and free Ukraine. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Let's now see how territorial claim narratives are used as a means of disinformation.
Territorial claim narratives are a disinformation strategy in which false or exaggerated stories are circulated to suggest that one country seeks to annex or reclaim territory from another. These narratives often reference historical borders, treaties, or ethnic ties to lend credibility, but are designed to bring about fear, distrust, and division between neighboring states. For example, pro-Kremlin actors have repeatedly spread claims that Poland, Hungary, or Romania plan to seize parts of Ukraine, or that Ukraine has designs on Belarusian land, despite no evidence or official intent.
Humans are emotional beings, and it's only natural that we experience fear. But with the current state of technology, it's become easier than ever to exploit fear to manipulate the masses. Whether it's a war or election campaigns, the techniques are the same. So when it feels like the world is in a state of emergency, it's important to stay rooted and digest the news. And remember to keep calm and think deeply.